The first thing Ambassador Vale noticed was the silence. It was not the kind of silence you get in a room. It was the kind that makes you feel like something is around and choosing not to move. He walked through the corridor of Predator Station Korah. Felt it before he saw it. There was a pressure in the air, a weight that wasn't from gravity. His second heart started beating. Then he turned the corner. A human was sitting on the floor of the corridor. Her eyes were closed. She was still. A lion was pressed against her side, its chin on her knee. It was a male, not a baby, not a tame one. It was a grown lion. 400 kilograms of muscle and scar tissue. Its mane was dark like burnt carbon. Its eyes were half open. It was watching Vale. It seemed to have made up its mind. Vale's leg stopped working. "He won't move," said the human. She didn't open her eyes, unless I ask him to. Her name was Maren Solis. She worked with Earth Diplomatic Corps. She had come to Korah 6 months ago with 2 bags and a translator chip. A lion named Dusk. No one had approved of Dusk. No one knew how to disapprove. "The council meeting starts in 20 minutes, Vale said. "I know," Maren replied. "You know that the Keth delegation wants you removed from the station," Vale added. Maren opened her eyes. They were calm. That was what made her unsettling. Keth eyes showed fear or aggression. Human eyes showed something else, something that had already been through what you were threatening. "I'm aware," she said. Dusk exhaled slowly. The sound filled the corridor. Vale took a step back. Then he stopped. He was a diplomat. He had dealt with the Shriek Collective. He had negotiated with the bone traders of Vel. He wasn't going to run from a creature that wasn't supposed to be on a station. "Will you attend?" he asked. "Yes," Maren replied. "The lion?" Vale asked. Maren looked up at him. Something moved behind her eyes. It wasn't warmth. It was close. "Dusk goes where I go," she said. That was when Vale saw 3 shapes. They were near the wall. They were hidden in the shadow of a cargo crate. They were watching him with amber eyes. Lion cubs. 3 of them. Vale hadn't even seen them arrive. He made a sound. His translator chip tried to translate it. The closest translation was distress. Maren looked at the cubs. Then she looked back at Vale. There was something on her face. Something gentle. "They followed us," she said. "They do that." Vale stared. 3 lion cubs. On a station. During a meeting to remove the human who had been quietly building a family with the sector's feared predators. He didn't understand humans. He was starting to think that was the point. The room where the council met was filled with the smell of fear. Maren could always tell when people were scared. It did not matter what kind of creature they were or how their bodies worked. Fear always had a smell that Maren's body could detect. The Keth group, there were 7 of them, tall and covered in plates with their crest feathers flat against their heads, were giving off this smell like they were on fire. They were scared of Maren. This still surprised her sometimes. She sat down at the table where she was supposed to be. Dusk sat down behind her without being asked, his body very still. His tail moved a little then stopped. The baby animals had been harder to control. 2 of them were under the table. One of them, a female that Maren had started calling Kama, was pressed against her leg, watching the Keth with curious eyes. The main Keth delegate Orvash stood up. "This meeting has been called." He started, his translator changing his clicks into something that sounded like speech to talk about one thing. Whether or not Maren Solis, the person in charge of talking to everyone, and her animals should still be here. Maren put her hands together on the table. "I understand," she said. "The big animals are a danger to everyone on the station. Many delegates have said they are scared. 3 workers who fix things have refused to go into areas where the animals have been. They stayed in a storage room for 2 days," Maren said, "because it was warm there. They were cold. They are the predators. Yes, they could kill every person in this room." Maren waited for a moment. "Yes, they could," she said. The room became very quiet. Orvish's crest feathers got even flatter. "You are saying this is true." "I will not lie to you," Maren said. She looked around the room. Vale was watching her from the side, his heart probably beating fast. The Morn delegate had turned gray, which meant he was very stressed. even the archivist, who wrote down everything and did not feel anything, had moved away from the table a little. The animals can kill you. They choose not to. That is their decision, not mine. Orvash spoke slowly. Then how do you make them listen to you? Maren looked down at Kama, who had put her soft head on Maren's boot and closed her eyes. I do not make them listen, she said. What she said was like a blow. Orvash took a breath. You do not control the animal that is in this room right now. No. How? Dusk trusts me, she said, simply, like she was saying what the weather was like. The babies trust me. They are here because they want to be. Behind her, Dusk moved his weight a little. The sound of his paw on the floor was very quiet. It made the Morn delegate jump up so fast that his chair fell over. Maren did not turn around. She kept looking at Orvash. You called this meeting to get rid of me. That is right. Then let us vote. Orvash looked at the delegates. They seemed to be talking without saying anything. We will vote, he said. When we are done. Kama opened her eyes. She looked straight at Orvash. He stopped talking. Maren felt something cold go down her spine. It was not fear. It was like she recognized something. She had seen that look in Dusk's eyes before he went hunting. It was like he was sizing something up and making a decision. Orvash sat down. Nobody laughed. Nobody breathed. Under the table the second, baby put its paw on Maren's knee. The vote didn't happen that day. It was postponed. Orvash's office said it was a delay and that they needed more testimony. Maren accepted this without saying anything, walked back to her quarters with Dusk by her side and 3 cubs following her like small dangerous planets. Orvash's office didn't say that after Maren left, Delegate Orvash sat in the room for 40 minutes without talking. Vale figured this out later from recordings of the corridors and reports from 2 Keth aides. They said that when his aide finally asked what was wrong, Orvash said, "The small one looked at me. I understood for the first time in my life what it means to be prey." Vale wrote this down as a critical incident report. Had a strong drink. The morning Vale found Maren on the observation deck feeding Dusk. She wasn't giving him meat. Something fibrous she called dried mango. You gave a lion dried fruit, Vale said. He likes it, Maren replied. That is deeply wrong, Vale said. Dusk turned his head, looked at Vale. Vale looked away first. He always looked away first. They're going to vote you out, Vale said. Orvash has the numbers. 6 delegates, 7. You'll be removed from the station. Reassigned. The Earth Diplomatic Corps won't fight it. It's too costly politically. Maren didn't stop feeding Dusk. I know, she said. You don't seem concerned, Vale said. I'm not, Maren replied. Vale pulled his translator collar tighter, a habit he developed since Maren arrived. Solis, they're removing you. Your mission here ends. Everything you've built, the trade agreements, the Morn Water Compact, the back channel with the Keth Biology Division. All of it collapses without a liaison, and you are the only one they'll tolerate. Why do they tolerate you? Maren asked. Vale blinked. Because you, he stopped. Because she had the lions. Because in 6 months she had become the entity on the station that the apex predators wouldn't ignore. Because 3 weeks ago Dusk had walked into a Keth dispute and sat down, and both Keth parties had immediately found reasons to leave, and the dispute had quietly ended. Because the cubs played in the corridors and the station's aggression levels had dropped 17%. No one could explain why. They fear the lions, Vale said carefully. The lions stay near you. So, they tolerate you. No, Maren said. She held out a piece of dried mango. One of the cubs, Kama, bolted up from nowhere, snatched it, and retreated under a chair. They fear what they don't understand, Maren said. The lions are the part they can see. The part that makes sense to them. Big teeth. Big claws. Obvious danger. She paused. I'm the part that doesn't make sense. Vale thought about this. Why did you bring them here? Truly, not the diplomatic cover. Why does a human diplomat arrive on a station with lions? Maren was quiet for a long moment. Outside the observation window, the stars moved slowly. Dusk's pride was killed, she said finally. Poachers. He was the survivor. He was 17 months old. I was doing field work. I found him. A pause. He found me, actually. That was, how ago? Vale asked. 8 years, Maren replied. Vale did the math. Dusk had been with her for 8 years. The cubs were Dusk's, which meant Maren had been present for. He chose you as his pride, Vale said, quietly. Yes, Maren said. The cubs were born knowing me, she said. She finally looked at him. Something in her face was unguarded for a moment. Old real expression. They came into the world with my scent in it. Far as they're concerned, she stopped. What? Vale asked. Far as they're concerned, Maren said. I'm family. The word went through Vale like a current. He thought of Orvash, of 6 delegates and their careful vote, of the machinery already moving toward its conclusion. Then he thought of 3 lion cubs who had been born into a world where human was family. He thought, they don't understand what they're voting on. He thought, they have no idea what happens when you try to separate a predator from its pride. The vote was set for the day of the week. Maren spent the morning doing her work. She took care of maintenance logs, she replied to diplomatic messages, and she solved a problem between the Morn delegation and a Keth supply contractor that nobody else wanted to deal with. She fixed it in 40 minutes. She was really good at her job. Everyone on the station knew that Maren was good at her job. That was the part that made Orvish's proposal so fair. He was not saying she was bad at her job. He was saying she was a danger to others. He was not wrong. Vale went to see Orvash the night before the vote. Change your mind, Vale said. Orvish's feathers on his head did their complicated thing. The station rules are clear. No unauthorized living things are allowed above threat level 4. The male is above level 7. He has not hurt anyone. He could hurt someone. So could I, Vale said. If I had the chemicals, should we vote on removing me? You are not the same as him. How are we different? Orvash was quiet for a moment. His office was clean and neat with everything at angles. Vale had always thought it was a space. Because you are afraid, Orvash finally said. Everything on this station, everything in this galaxy that I have dealt with, it all works because of fear. Fear of losing something, fear of what might happen, fear of things that read different. It makes things predictable. He stopped for a moment. The human is not afraid. Is she not afraid of the lion? No, she is not afraid of anything. Orvash put down the paper he was holding. She sits next to a lion that could kill her in 1 second. She gives it food. She walks into a room where 7 Keth delegates are talking about removing her. She tells us that she cannot control the animals that are the reason we have not thrown her out already. He looked at Vale. That is not being confident. That is something. I do not have a word for it. The human word, Vale said slowly, is trust. Orvash picked up the paper again. The vote will happen tomorrow. Vale left. He did not tell Maren about the conversation. He was not sure why. Maybe it was because he thought she already knew. Maybe it was because he was starting to understand that Maren Solis never did anything without a reason, and the reason was never what you thought it was. The meeting started at the bell. There were 9 delegates, 1 human liaison, 1 archivist recording everything, Dusk lying across the threshold of the chamber door, which meant everyone had to step over him to enter. No one had asked him to lie. No one had moved him either. The vote started. Orvash presented the proposal. The chamber felt heavy, like the decision was already made. 6 votes for it, 2 abstentions, 1 against. Simple majority. Fair. Clear. Maren sat at the liaison table with her hands folded. The voting stones were being passed around. Then the chamber door opened again. 3 small shapes walked in. Her brother, the one Maren called Ark. The 3rd cub, the quiet one, the one who never came near the meetings, who Maren had named Still. They walked in like they owned the place. Went to the center of the chamber floor. Saturday. Ark sat beside her. Still walked to the liaison table, jumped up. The delegates all flinched at the time, and sat down next to Maren. The voting stones stopped moving. Orvash stared. What is happening, he said. Maren looked at the cubs. Then, at the delegates, her face did not show anything. I do not know, she said. Honestly, they followed me. Something in her voice, something that was not there before, had changed. She was holding back a smile. Nobody voted for the motion. That was the thing that stood out. The stones were there in their hands. The motion was open for discussion. 6 delegates had already committed to voting. Still nobody voted. Orvash tried to get things moving. He raised his stone to vote. He looked at Still, the little cub sitting on the table, and Still looked back at him. Still was 4 months old and weighed 12 kilograms, but he had these big eyes that were the color of late sunlight, and he did not seem scared at all. Orvash put his stone down without voting. We need a pause, he said. His voice was calm and controlled, which was something that Vale had always admired about him. There are some things in the room. We will recess for now. Nobody argued with Orvash's decision. They all filed out of the room, carefully making sure not to step on Dusk, who was lying at the threshold. They also made a point not to look at the cubs. They all moved very calmly, like they were trying not to scare them. This was because their species had learned a time ago that sudden movements near predators can be a bad idea. Vale stayed behind in the room. He watched as Maren sat down with the 3 cubs and the lion. He had a thought that this was what Maren really looked like. Not the liaison, but just a woman with lion cubs climbing all over her. One of the cubs' arc was even trying to chew on her collar. Dusk, the lion, got up and went to lie down beside her chair, resting his massive head on her knee. He looked relieved. Vale said from the door, "They are going to reschedule the meeting." Maren replied, "I know they will." Vale then said, "Time, they will probably ask that the animals be kept away." Maren said, "That is probably true." Vale pointed out, "If you agree to that, you will lose your leverage." Maren just scratched behind Ark's ears and said, "The lions were never leverage. That is what everyone keeps getting wrong." Vale came closer to Maren. He needed to understand what she meant. He had been a diplomat for 31 years. Thought he knew all about leverage and pressure. He did not understand Maren's perspective. "Then, what are the lions?" he asked. Maren looked up at him, said, "They are my family. They are here because family stays together. It is not a strategy or a trick. I would never leave them behind no matter what." Vale stood still. He was thinking about what Maren had said. Outside the room, the station was still running as usual. The life support systems were. The orbital corrections were being made. The station was a place designed to hold 17 different species together, even though they did not always get along. Vale said, "Earth Command is going to be very upset with you." Maren replied, "Earth Command is not here now." Dusk, the lion, lifted his head and looked at Vale. It was like he was sizing him up, deciding if he was a threat. Then Dusk lay back down, resting his head on Maren's knee. It was like he was saying, "You are allowed to stay. You are not a threat to her." Vale felt a sensation. It was not exactly fear. It was something complex. He felt like he was being seen and understood in a way that he never had before. "There are people on this station," he said, "who think the lions are the threat. Some of them are starting to suspect that the lions are actually the safe part. They think you are the one who's really dangerous." Maren asked, "Why do they think I am dangerous?" Vale explained, "It is because you cannot be understood or predicted. You befriend the creatures in the room and they become gentle. Nobody can explain how you do it. That is what makes you so frightening." Maren did not say anything. Still, the little cub had fallen asleep on the table. Another cub was circling around Vale's feet, trying to decide if he was interesting or not. Vale looked down at her. She looked up at him. He did not run away. That felt like a small victory. He asked Maren, "What happens now?" Maren stroked Dusk's mane, said, "Now we wait and see who they really are." 3 days went by. Orvash filed the precondition. The animals had to be kept in Maren's quarters during all sessions. Maren had to comply within 48 hours. If she did not comply, it would trigger a motion of expulsion. No vote would be required, and there would be no appeal. Maren read the document. She set it down. She fed Dusk his morning meal. At hour 39 of the 48-hour window, Vale came to Maren with something he had not shown anyone. It was a document. It was filed by Keth Delegate 7th Chair Asa, Orvish's deputy, quietly without announcement requesting a formal review of the precondition on the grounds that it violated Compact Article 9. The right of any diplomatic agent to maintain cultural continuity in their living and working arrangements. Vale said to Maren he filed it himself. Orvish's own deputy filed the document. Maren looked up from her tea. Vale continued he was the one who stepped over Dusk on the way out of the chamber. He stopped, halfway over. For 3 seconds. Dusk did not move. Dusk did not react. Dusk just breathed. Vale paused. Asa told me privately that in that moment he understood something. Asa said, "An animal that could kill me chose not to. That is not nothing. That is a decision." Maren agreed. It is a decision. Vale said, Asa started thinking about what kind of being earns that decision, what kind of trust requires 8 years to build, and does not break when you walk into a room of creatures that fear the thing you love. The words sat in the air between Maren and Vale. Vale said, he is not voting to remove you. He is going to bring 2 others. The motion fails. Maren was quiet for a time. Then she set down her tea, leaned forward, and put her face in her hands. Not because she was grieving Vale, realized watching her shoulders. Maren was not grieving. Maren was relieved. Maren was feeling the private relief of someone who had been holding something heavy for a very long time. Dusk moved immediately. He crossed the room in 3 steps, pressed himself against Maren. All of him 400 kilograms, his head pushing gently against her shoulder, steady and massive and warm. The cubs climbed over everything. Kama climbed onto her back. Ark climbed across her feet, still climbed beside her, pressed his small dense head into her palm. Vale watched a human diplomat be surrounded by lions and understood, with a clarity that hit him below language, that he was witnessing something his species had never evolved a word for. This was what humans did. Humans loved things that could destroy them and were loved back. Humans called that. Humans built their civilization on it. Humans walked into council chambers and expected everyone else to understand. When they did not understand, humans were quietly, genuinely baffled. Humans were not arrogant. Humans were not strategic. Humans were baffled. Vale said, the session reconvenes tomorrow. Asa's review delays the precondition. The original motion is still open. It goes to vote. Maren lifted her face from her hands. Her eyes were dry. Maren's eyes were always dry. Maren said, then we will go. Vale said, the cubs. Maren said, the cubs will go where I go. Vale nodded. He had known Maren was going to say that. Vale was starting to believe Maren had known what his next line would be too. Vale said, there is something. This morning, before I came here. Vale hesitated. I went to the chamber early to check the preparations. Vale stopped. Maren waited. Vale said, the cubs were already there. Maren frowned. That is not possible. The cubs were here all night. Vale said, quietly, I know what I saw. 3 cubs, sitting in the chamber, in the dark, waiting. Vale paused. The chamber was locked. I have the exterior access code. No one let the cubs in. There was silence. Dusk raised his head. He looked at the door. He looked at the cubs. He looked at Vale with that knowing expression that no translator chip had ever successfully decoded. Then Dusk laid his head back down, closed his eyes, and exhaled. Long, slow, satisfied, as though something had gone according to plan. The room was full. Not just the 9 delegates. People had heard about it. Come to watch. The gallery was packed. I counted 37 people. Then stopped. Maren walked in. Dusk was behind her step for step. The cubs were already in the room. They were seated, Kama in the center, Ark beside her at the liaison table. It looked like they had called the meeting themselves. Orvash looked at them. He looked at the door. He looked at Maren. She shook her head. I don't know how either. He stared for seconds. Then he sat down. Maybe that was the moment it ended. Not the vote. Not the argument. Not the math. The moment Orvash looked at 3 lion cubs who had gotten through a locked door to sit in a council room and decided that he didn't understand what was going on. There were things he hadn't been trained for. The meeting started. Asa presented the review. It was precise and thorough. 3 other delegates had written statements to support it. People I hadn't expected to. When it was time to vote, it wasn't close. 7-2. Maren stayed. No one cheered. It wasn't that kind of moment. The room felt like it was holding its breath and then slowly letting it out. Like something careful had happened, a shift in pressure rather than a celebration. Orvash sat for a moment after the vote. Then he stood up. He walked to the liaison table. He stood in front of Still. The quiet cub, who watched everything and said nothing. Still had somehow been in this room before anyone else arrived. Still looked at him. He was 4 months old and 12 kilograms. He was the descendant of something that had survived ice ages and human centuries and the slow violence of a planet that didn't care if anything lived or died. Orvash reached out a hand. Slowly, carefully. It was something he did. Still sniffed his hand. Then he butted his head against it. Once. Firmly. The gallery made a sound. Not words. Just a noise. The sound of 37 people watching something happen. Orvash stood there for a moment. His feathers, I realized, were not flat. For the time since Maren arrived on Korah, Orvash's feathers were calm. Not afraid. He turned to Maren. The motion is defeated, he said formally. Lower. Just for her. He said, how? She understood the question. Not how did you win. Not how did the cubs get in. How do you do this? How does a creature trust you like that? How do you make something deadly choose you? Maren looked at Dusk. He was watching her like he did. Patient, total like he had decided 8 years ago, and never changed his mind. You stop trying to control them, she said. You stop being afraid of what they're. You just, she paused. You show up. Every day. You show up. You're honest and you're present, and eventually they know you. Really know you. She looked at Orvash. It takes a time. You can't fake it. They always know if you're faking. Orvash thought about this. That is how you do diplomacy, he said slowly. With the lions. That's how I do everything, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he bowed his head. Not the bow, which is precise and political. Something smaller. Something personal. Maren bowed her head back. Kama, from the center of the room, yawned hugely. Her teeth caught the light. Several delegates leaned away. She seemed not to care and began cleaning her paw. I exhaled for what felt like the time in a week. I looked down at the station below through the gallery window. All the corridors and pressurized rooms and political machinery of a place built for species that feared each other. I thought, something changed today, and most of us won't understand it for years. I thought, she knew. She knew along that the vote wasn't the point. I thought the point was always the moment after the vote. The moment Orvash reached out his hand. Below me, Maren was gathering her things to leave. The cubs orbited her. Dusk rose from the floor like a tide. The gallery watched in silence. This woman and her lions, this unit, this thing that had no precedent in any diplomatic record in any species archive, just before she reached the door, still stopped. He turned. He looked directly at the gallery, at all of us. His eyes moved once. Slow, deliberate measuring, across every face. Then he turned back, followed Maren through the door. In the gallery, 37 beings from 9 different species sat very still and felt, in the wordless part of themselves that no translator could touch, exactly what it meant to be looked at by something ancient, what it meant to be seen, what it meant to have been judged, and permitted to remain.